Jordan, what's happening, man? How we doing?
I'm all right, man. I'm all right. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm excited. At this point, I am finally we're heading back to New York City. By the time this episode drops, I'll already be back in the Big Apple, so I'm very excited about that. We'll definitely maintaining that necessary social distance, wearing a mask, fucking mask on.
I'll have to travel to you and then wave to you because that's as close as I'm going to get.
We'll have to do the distance tap.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, with that said, very excited to have our guest on today, Bina Fronda. Bina is the marketing director at Ultra Records. She's responsible for overseeing the marketing strategies and partnerships for Ultra artists, which has an incredible roster of some of the world's leading electronic and dance music artists. So Steve Aoki, Kygo, Sofi Tukker, MK, Benassi, the Magician. We've been able to cross paths as an artist I've done a lot of work with, Black Coffee. Has a deal with Ultra Records and has released a lot of music on that label. So it's always been fun being able to collaborate and work with their team throughout the years. And I think Bina incredibly smart. She's been working at Ultra for the past 6 years and currently is leading the marketing team. So I think she really understands how to build and execute upon world-class rollouts and campaigns for some of the world's biggest dance music artists. The things I really enjoyed and appreciated most about this episode were her thoughts on kind of building a cohesive brand, how the marketing and digital landscape continues to evolve, and where you should really be putting your focus on for the artists you're working with. And then lastly, towards the end of the episode, we really kind of close out with how you can really go about adapting and continuing to build community in the time of COVID. So what did you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I think it's a super insightful episode. I think we had a good rapport with her. I think some of the highlights, in my opinion, are a lot of people ask me, or a lot of people come to me and I always ask them, what's your goal for your next release? Not what's your goal for your career, what's your goal for your next release? And they always tell me, I want this to be in as many ears as possible, which is always the goal. But in this, we actually talk about how to actually boil that down and that big aspiration and actually turn it into an attainable goal. We also talk about what her favorite marketing plan that she was a part of and why. It's an awesome marketing plan that she facilitated for Sofi Tukker. And we also talk about her favorite marketing plan that she hasn't been a part of and why. So people will be able to know what it's like, not just to boil down aspirations into goals, but also what success actually looks like in terms of a rollout and a marketing plan. So definitely gems.
And if you haven't already, it's getting popping in the Music Business Podcast Discord. Really love having conversations, getting an opportunity for you guys to submit questions before we do interviews with our guests, help each other. So if you haven't already, be sure to check out musicbusinesspodcast.com/community. And without any further ado, let's jump into the episode.
Let's do it.
Bina, what's up? Welcome to the show. How are you?
Happening. I'm doing good. How are you?
We're good. Very excited to have you on today. I think it's been fun to cross paths in our experience. But I think really excited to dive into all things marketing, all things Ultra. I know you've been able to work with a bunch of amazing artists. So I think for starters, if you could really just kind of like set the stage when it comes to like what are you currently focused on at Ultra?
Everything. So just a little backtrack. So I do marketing over at Ultra Records, which is an independent label and the biggest dance independent label in the U.S. So we represent artists that are in the electronic space all across the board. So we represent Steve Aoki, Sofi Tukker, Black Coffee, Carnage, and the list goes on and on. So it's really all different genres within the electronic space. And so I run the marketing team and I work with a group of marketing managers / product managers who are what I like to say the extension of management in a way, because they're the ones who relay like visions, coming together with plans, strategy, and execution around upcoming releases for an artist, whether it be a single, a piece of video content, a full-fledged album. We work with the artist team as well as label team and outside contacts to get everything through with the same mission that the artist has.
That's amazing. That's super exciting. And I think definitely have kind of incredible roster of artists and continue to uphold really high standards. So when it comes to how your role has evolved, I know you've been there for what, about 6 years now?
6 years, yeah.
That's amazing.
Crazy.
How has the role itself evolved throughout the years? I know you mentioned now you're kind of like leading the marketing team. Can you speak a little bit to the journey and the steps you took to continue growing there?
Yeah. I think Ultra definitely has like a knack for hustlers and people who just have really good like self-initiative. And it's a place where you can grow. So if you have that kind of attitude, then you'll grow within the company. So I got my start as an assistant. I was a marketing coordinator, so I was always in the same department, but I knew very little. I had originally come from more of the live side. I used to freelance at festivals, music events. I did everything from artist hospitality to artist transportation to ticketing, you name it. So I was always more hands-on in the industry, but I wanted to use that energy and apply it to artist campaigns. So I took on the role. I started out as a coordinator. Half of it was right timing. And then the other half of it was, just kind of hustling and offering to help where, no one was asking for help. But in doing so, I was able to learn more and do more, and then eventually be trusted more in order to take on larger projects and bigger positions. And so that's kind of how I slowly moved up the ranks, if you will. And so then transitioned into a marketing manager. I took on some really great projects as a marketing manager. I was able to really excel in a lot of the releases that I worked on and be able to be in a position that when there was an availability to be the director of marketing, I was considered just as any other person who was applied. I kind of like went through the process as well, and eventually, got the position, was asked to take on the position, which has been great. So that's kind of like my personal role, my personal journey. But the role itself continues to also constantly evolve because marketing is constantly evolving. So whenever people ask like what is the marketing team, I think when you go to a major label, you've got the marketing department, the digital department, product manager department. When you go to an indie, if you go to a really small indie, it's one person handling everything. We tend to be like a middle tiered indie in the sense that we've got a big team, we've got the resources, but we're still quite small in comparison to, majors. And so marketing managers and product managers for us, it's the same thing. It's the same role. And we do the execution portion of it where we ensure that we have everything that we need in order to get a release out. But then we also get to do what I like to say is like the fun stuff, which is coming up with the actual like marketing strategy, activations, and then actually fleshing them out and putting them into execution. So the role continues to evolve because, times change. There's fads in the sense that when I first started in the dance world, everything was about SoundCloud, and now everything is about Spotify when it comes to the type of platform targets that you work for. So, knowing how to go with the flow and be on the pulse when it comes to promotion.
For sure. No, and it's so crazy too, because I think this is when I personally used to work with like Gary Vee and Gary Vaynerchuk, and his whole motto is like always trying to find the underpriced attention, and that's kind of keep an eye out for these emerging platforms so you can kind of grow with the platforms and go to places where there's less competition. So in that same vein, and you've already alluded to the evolution, but can you speak to some of the like how your approach to marketing has evolved throughout the years, like thinking back to like 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago versus like what a similar approach today would be for an artist rollout or an artist campaign?
What does the shift from SoundCloud to Spotify look like over the years?
Yeah. So especially within a digital perspective and digital platforms, digital marketing, that change is like more evident than, let's say, marketing, which I'll get into. But for example, in the dance space, SoundCloud was always big because that's where a lot of like major dance artists and producers got discovered. primary example, Kygo, right? Kygo got discovered because he did some really cool remixes. He did one for Whitney Houston. He did one with Marvin Gaye, and they blew up on SoundCloud. But then that translated over to the other DSPs. Same thing with Kaytranada. I don't know why I still remember the day I followed him on SoundCloud, and he had 300 followers, and I was just like, why? Like, how is this possible? This guy.
Kaytranada is so underrated. He's like one of the goats in my book for sure.
Yeah, me too.
So like he really is. He's a shit. So like it's through that platform, so many artists in the dance space just got recognition. Some of the type of activations that were done are ways to promote it. The biggest one being reposting, right? Like there was a reposting business with SoundCloud and pitching to big accounts, curating accounts that would support a record. You kind of see that now on YouTube, and it's still big on YouTube, right? You've got the third-party playlist network. There are all these different channels. They're not labels, right? They're just curating. They're making playlists, but they have a massive outreach, and so they're able to, get it out to bigger audiences than maybe the artists on their own. And now that's shifted over to what everybody knows, the Spotify playlists, right? And so you've got the Spotify branded playlists, and the ones that those editors are supporting or curating or whatever. And that's where every artist wants to get on every, buzzy playlist that's on Spotify or key playlist that's on Spotify. And that is a huge part of how they're promoting their record. So there's definitely been shifts in terms of like what the actual promotion is, whether it's reposting or playlist or what have you. But the outlet itself just keeps shifting around.
Yeah.
So
sure.
How does you talked about digital, I guess in terms of just like marketing, I think of like building a community, essentially, like having people feel like they're a part of something larger. How do you think that's kind of changed over time, especially in the dance space?
Yeah, definitely. So I think a couple of things that I've seen evolve in marketing is content and how it's released and how much of it is released. I think there's always been the foundations of an artist's release, song, album, whatever. They've got the music that comes out, they've got visual content that aligns with it, and then they have mixes or remixes or kind of like reinterpretations of what the body of work that comes out. And I think now content is even like more of a demand, and even more, right? So it's smaller snippets, but more of it. And then made available for different social platforms, right? So usually it would have been like, at least in my start, woodworking and music, official video to the song. Now it's official video to the song, as well as snippets for socials and a canvas for Spotify, which is an 8-second loop, and BTS footage that's going to be used with different publications or on an artist's IGTV. So it's the content and the way the artist releases the content, or the fact that there is content aligned with the music itself, the visual content, that's the same. It's just it really like how much of it, and then the different types of platforms that it caters to, right? So there might be a TikTok snippet, but that's specifically made for TikTok as opposed to something that is specifically made for IGTV. So that's definitely changed and grown within the past couple of years.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Content.
You know it.
Yeah, no, too well. I feel like I'm living in like this never-ending like vortex of content. To be honest.
Sometimes I'm like, I have ideas. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, for sure. So you alluded to something earlier too. You mentioned that there's kind of like having the vision and mission of the artist, and I think that's really important on the content side too, because I think at the foundation, and I'm sure like whenever you're developing like rollout plans, you're really thinking around like, what makes this artist unique? What's the narrative? What's special here? And you want to make sure there's a level of kind of continuity through all of the content, through the rollout. Can you speak a little bit to that kind of like because this is really one of like the first dominoes as you really start managing and planning a marketing rollout, I presume. So can you speak to like what you think about when you're trying to really crystallize or get dialed in on what that narrative and what that kind of brand strategy and voice is?
Yeah. So, like, connected but off topic, there's two main things that are like philosophies that I've learned in working in this role, more or less, for the past couple of years, which is one, if the team is not connected strongly and doesn't have the same vision, then it makes it really difficult for the project to succeed, because that's kind of like self-sabotaging the other, right? Like the artist needs to be on the same page with the manager, that needs to be on the same page with the product manager, that needs to be on the same page with the A&R team and the digital team. And then it's a trickle effect, because that's what it is, right? Like the product managers are like the liaisons for the label and outside context, PR, press, radio, whatever it may be. So if we're not on the same page as management, and we're like, we've got our own agenda, it makes it really difficult for there to be trust, and then for therefore to be like input. So that's like, like that's what, and that plays such a huge role in the actual like coming up with the mission, right? Like that brand strategy. So when we're starting that out, some artists are like, I would say they're like the blessing, because they already have that, right? Like their essence is like their brand identity. So it's just a matter of figuring out like, all right, well, let's say this is an album and you wrote this album. What were you thinking about when you were writing this album? What does it mean to you? How do you want people to perceive it? So there's like an interview process that happens between us and the team and us and the artist, depending on, depending on the team. And then we just start to kind of like, pluck out like, oh, this could be used in this way. This could be used in that way. We could use this as a marketing angle, this, that, and the other. So first we just like ask all of like the basic questions, like what does it mean? How do you want it to be perceived? What is the style? What kind of creative do you want for it? Get the mood board. And then from there, we start to set up targets, and then we start going for them.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So when it comes to like setting the targets for the rollouts, and I mean, if rollouts are so interesting, I know there's like a lot of different ways in which we can really dive into it. So let's start. When it comes to like one question we have, I mean, obviously like paid media and having a budget is a luxury that not all artists have, but there's a lot of different elements of if you do have a paid media budget or a media budget, how you can deploy it. If you had $100K like marketing budget to help push out an album that's dropping in 3 months, how do you think about like allocating it in today's like digital and just marketing landscape?
I'll put it in my pocket and run away.
There we go.
I quit my job.
Yeah. I retired.
No, just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah. No.
Well, the way Sam said it, he made it sound like you were just going to get a suitcase of money. So, like, yo, you got to spend this on the artist. Like, no.
Well, one, I think it depends on the genre, right? So there are certain genres where certain paid media, let's say, works for them. For an example, if you look at the Latin space, they put a heavy emphasis on YouTube video views, and paid media behind that, right? So they work with different types of like true view spends or sponsored posts or whatever that's specific to the videos, because that is a big priority for them, that the numbers are really big on YouTube specifically. So other genres might not need that as much, and so their focus might be elsewhere. It also depends on the artist, right? Because some artists might not be as radio friendly. So if we know, like from the get-go, that this isn't necessarily going to be a radio release, it might be like a culture release, right? In the sense that like We can do a lot with the content. We can do a lot with different kind of working with different publications, maybe doing sponsored posts through the publications, working with different brands. So we might not allot as big of a radio budget for those artists. I mean, speaking of like Kaytranada before, right? Like it's so underrated, but you don't hear him on the radio in the US, though he should be, right? But he's successful, right? Like he is a successful artist who tours extremely well and is like well respected by all different genres of artists. So, that depends on the artist. And then it also depends on, you've got your artists where they really like that, like I had mentioned before, that like branding, that mission is part of their DNA. So making content makes sense for them because it's striking. People are going to pay attention to it. Like you've got Lady Gaga with Chromatica, and that shit's wild, but it makes sense because it's Gaga and everybody's going to go and watch a Gaga video, So they probably paid, who knows, like $500,000 for that video with her and Ariana Grande, but they knew they were going to get that money back in a way. So it was worth the investment. So sometimes we have artists that, it makes more sense to spend more money on a piece of video content because we know that it's going to be well received. It's going to do well as a video, and it's important to that project. So kind of like depends, depends on the artist. And then when it comes to ad spend, same thing, right? Like if we've got everything aligned, like all of the DSPs are on board, they're planning on supporting the record, we know it's going to be work to radio. We need it like from the jump. We want to have XYZ countries supporting the record and supporting it through radio and promo and all of that, then we'll figure out how to like dedicate spends behind it too, so that people are paying attention to that record.
Right. So a question I get a lot, and this kind of piggybacks off what you're talking about, and it depends on the situation, the artist, the genre for marketing budget, is a lot of people always ask me, like, I always ask people what their goals are for their next release. And they just say, I want to have as many people listen to this record as possible. That's always like the number one thing I get. And I always think it's like too vague, because obviously that's what you always want from every record. How do you boil down something from, we want this record to be the biggest record in the world, to something that you can actually attain?
That's a good question. And I think to add to that, like I find that a lot too, where it's like, well, you're keeping like the theme, like the concept of the release too vague. And when you keep it too vague, then it gives me as someone who, when I'm figuring out ideas, right? Because on the marketing side, we're just constantly coming up with ideas, like, and some are horrible and some are amazing, but that's the point. We just need to keep ideas. If you give me nothing to work with and all you're telling me is that you want to release this and that's it, like, where are these ideas going to come from? And sometimes then I'll like be hanging out with the artist and they'll tell me something and I'm like, why did nobody tell me this a month ago? Like I could have done something with it.
Right.
So it's and what I've noticed too, sometimes like artists don't realize that people are interested in finding out about them. They like don't realize that fans want to know that they're actually really into cuisine or love cooking or, are into whatever it is that they're into. But the truth is they are. And that is like everything is a tie-in and a way to connect. And I think that's part of like you said, like keeping it too vague. And that becomes a challenge sometimes when it's too vague. And, to answer your question on that, like when an artist is saying like, I want as much as possible, just kind of like working with the teams and trying to backtrack. Like, well, what's our immediate goal? Okay. What's our goal after that? And trying to be, the marketing managers and product managers tend to be like the ones who are truthful because we strive towards that because we don't want to, tell management like, yeah, it's gonna be number one on top 40 radio. When artists like is just starting. So it's really being realistic about those goals. And sometimes that can be a difficult conversation, but we're the front lines. We have to have those honest conversations with artists and artist management. Because to my point before, like if the team is tight and the team is honest with each other and the team is on the same page, then they will do well, and they'll be able to like get that message across.
Right,
so
right.
That was like an all over the place answer, but
well, it's a little bit open ended too, So like obviously like goal setting is different for each artist. So when I asked you that question, I wasn't necessarily expecting like, well, first they do this, they release a song, and then it was a little more like, in that situation, what's some of the higher level things that you do to boil it down to something that is actually approachable? It's funny you say, when you're talking to artists, you're like, they say something, you're like, why didn't someone tell me this? I have been in conversations with people before, my clients, where I've gone out with them, maybe to drinks or something, and they started saying something, and I was like, hold on. Like, let me take notes on this, because I like really need this in order to market your record or to push this record in the way that you want me to. You know what I mean? So it's just funny that you say that. And I do think, I have worked with people where it's like, the next record, the next playlist I want to be on is Rap Caviar, or the next playlist I want to be on is Most Necessary. And it's like, okay, well, where do we go from here realistically? Because we can get you there. It might not be this album cycle, but we can get you there. But what realistically? And it's a hard line to walk, I think, because you don't want to insult anyone, right? Like, so,
definitely. But at the same time, you don't want to lie to them in the sense
exactly.
That, listen, I can't get you on Rap Caviar for this release, but let's keep setting like the foundation and building on the foundation and building maybe the first song, the second song, keep pitching, sending the editors like, hey, this is what happened on the first song, this is what happened on the second song. And by the time the third song comes out, then they're like, okay, it's ready to be on Rap Caviar because of what you've done to build out the first couple of songs. And, it's being honest in those conversations when we speak with the artists and artist teams.
Right. So I kind of have two questions, but they're kind of one question, just, two sides of the coin. The first one is what's one of your favorite marketing campaigns that you've worked on, and why is it one of your favorites? And also, what's one of your favorite campaigns that you haven't worked on? One where you were like, oh man, I wish I was a part of that, or I wish I'd have come up with that, or man, there's something that I learned from that.
Totally. Sure. So one that I've worked on that I was really proud of, and I think it was personal because I come from a visual arts background, and so I work with Sofi Tukker. I rep Sofi Tukker as a marketing manager for them. And so when they had their debut album come out, Treehouse, they are a creator's dream, like a creative director's dream, because they are down to like big ideas and get really like creative, and whatever you need them to do, if it's wacky, they'll do it, and they are an incredible example of a very like united team. Their managers are fantastic. They are fantastic. And it's like the communication is very clear between the teams. And so they trust me that when I speak on Sofi Tukker's behalf, that I'm doing what they would have done. Right.
Right.
So when we had the debut album come out, it was a dream. We got to do really cool activations, and we also had the budget to do it. And so some of the things that we did at that time, the Spotify Fan First were huge, were really big. And we did one of the Spotify Fan First activations. And so we did it in New York, and the whole theme of the album was like stepping into this world that they had created. At that point, they had released an EP, a couple of singles. Their like fans were just like the fans that showed up to their shows. Like everything was very inclusive, and they were all about that, like allowing people to feel really comfortable in their space. And so the House was the space. So we transformed elsewhere in Brooklyn, and we turned it into their world and made it look like the inside of a tree house. And we got this really cool creative production company that came in that does stuff for like Tomorrowland and Burning Man, and they're just like really wacky creators. And I mean, it looked like their world. It was so amazing to see that, and it was awesome to be part of the creative process in bringing in this team and being like, I need a tree house in here, like make it happen. And there was like blow up giraffes and like confetti everywhere, and they literally like built a treehouse, like a DJ booth with like planks of wood everywhere. And the Spotify team was like, okay, like you're crazy. Like this is fine. Like we've been to some really cool events, but nothing as just like creative as this one.
Right.
And that's what made working on that project so much fun for me, is that everything we did, we got to be really creative with it. We also did that same year, they performed at Coachella. And so we, you know, of course, everybody that performs at Coachella wants a billboard on the way to Coachella. And so we were like,
right.
all right, we'll do the conventional billboard, but let's try something new. So we got like a massive like bus, like, you know, like those tour buses, and we covered it with the artwork, and it looked like it was wrapped with the like treehouse artwork. And then we made a map on socials, and you can see the route of the bus where it went on the map on socials, and it would go to like where the Revolve House was, and it would take people to the festival, and we like turned it into like call to action event. So we did a lot of really cool things like that, and the band was involved in it, which what made it special. And then of course the cherry topping is, and then the album got nominated for a Grammy. So I was just like, okay, that's cool. Shit. So that was a really special one to me. And then a release that I saw that I had nothing to do with it, but was really impressed by its rollout. I mean, Harry Styles, like, yeah, or like got the biggest budget or whatever, but I always look at it and create, like, in terms of creativity, because that's how I market. Like, 15 years of studying art, can't help it. But he when the recent album came out, there was the video Adore You, and they did this whole it was like a website landing page, and it was basically the premise of the official video for Adore You was this like fictional island, and Harry Styles lives in this fictional island, and he befriends a fish, and like the fish is the only living thing that likes Harry, because Harry like has a weird smile, and nobody talks to him because of his weird smile. And then what they did was they made the island, like they made a touring landing page for the island as if it was like a real place, and people just like went crazy for it. And it also trended on Twitter, and of course, it's Harry Styles, his fan base is wild, they'll do anything. But I just thought it was such a like creative way to promote like one single and one video, but
right.
The concept is really strong, then you can do that, right? Like, I mean, it was just like such a wacky, artsy video, but he literally made up an island, like a fake
right.
island.
Right.
And I just thought that was the many cool projects coming out, like a really great rollout.
And I personally thought that album was good. So it always obviously helps when the content, backs up the album and what the album sounds like, because that's the most important thing. We say on this podcast all the time. I think people don't hear us though. The music is always going to be the most important thing. Like no marketing budget can make the music, can make it quality. So
100%.
Great marketing budget. Harry Styles album was great. That's like a kind of everything coming together at the same time.
Yeah.
I guess as we kind of wrap up, obviously the big elephant in the room is the pandemic. So how have you as a marketer built that sense of community effectively, during a global crisis like this one, where people can't, you can't have that indoor pop-up that you're talking about with the treehouse, so how are you, how have you had to pivot?
Yeah. Well, it's figuring out how to turn that treehouse, that space, into a virtual space. And I'm going to use Sofi Tukker as an example, because they really they tapped into it. Like, it happened during quarantine where they tapped into that space. Like, they already had a treehouse, a band. Like, before quarantine happened, they had released a single called Purple Hat, and in the lyrics of the song, Purple Hat cheetah print. And without pushing it, fans just started showing up at their shows with purple hats and cheetah print. Like, all you saw was purple and cheetah print everywhere, and it was fantastic. But that just happened organically. And so day one of quarantine, you see a lot of artists. You saw the first group of artists who were like, okay, we're going to be in this for a while. Let's start connecting online. Diplo did it first. Dylan Francis did it first. Sofi Tukker was part of that first wave. And it is 120 some days later, and they have been doing lives every single day at 1:00 for 30 minutes.
Wow.
The first days was just them putzing around. Then Sofi started learning how to DJ too, and then it was Sofi and Tukker. Then their dance moves started matching. Then their outfits started matching. Then they have like all of these trees like all over. Then they like added like logos to it. Then it went from Instagram Live to Instagram Live and Facebook. And then Instagram Live and Facebook and Twitch. And then the Twitch chat started this like collective of their fans. And then the fans just slowly, like, because they were coming up with a lot of like songs in the mixes that kept using the word freak. And so then like slowly the fans were like, well, we're the Freak fam. And now like, that's it. That is their fan, like what their fans are called. They're called the Freak fam, and they made Freak fam merch. And they now what they do is when they watch the daily live stream on Twitch, they also have a Zoom chat going of the Freak fam that's just like, became a supportive community. So it all happened organically, but Sofi Tukker, they fueled it and they participated in it. And because of that, they were able to like really connect with their fans in a way that what happens is when artists are on tour, it's a different type of connecting. It's me, artist on stage, you fan like watching. And now like there is no stage, there is no floor. We're all on the same page. And so
you're in quarantine, I'm in quarantine.
Exactly. You now know what the inside of my home looks like. Like that is intimate. And so it's been a journey working with artists as they discover how to be more intimate with their fans, and then I think an artist like working with, of course, like everybody's going through it, right? And like figuring out like, what's my role in this, right? Like, what's my role like in doing these doing live streams and connecting with fans? Like, how do I want to connect with them there? And you're seeing a lot of like artists really build out their fan bases through it, like their social account numbers are like skyrocketing, but they're putting in that time and effort in a way that maybe if they were like touring and doing promo during touring and doing like key press, maybe they weren't able to connect with fans in that way. So it's been really interesting to see artists kind of like go through that.
Right. And one thing I noticed that they did is that they were consistent. They did it every day for how many days you said?
I think today was 125.
125. So like when you go to a concert, you can obviously, you could go to one concert. Like my girlfriend's mom, she went to this one Bruce Springsteen concert, and that pretty much she was going to be a fan for life, but if she wasn't, that was the moment she became a fan for life. But in the digital space, our attentions are so fragmented because if you go to a concert, you're at that concert. Like you can't physically be in two places at once. But at the same time, when I'm watching a live stream, I could be checking my phone, I could be on Facebook. So I do think the key to kind of thriving in this time is consistency. I know Sam and I, we talk all the time, like this is our game to lose. If we're not consistent, then, that's, we're not leaving first base. So I guess for people listening, that's really impressive though. That's like super impressive.
Totally. And, and I mean like that, God bless them and the stamina they have and and all that. But you also look at like, I mean, Diplo, right? Diplo from the get-go, he started with just live streams. Then he had the whole like Corona Sabbath weekends where it's like Thursday to Sunday, and he had all different sets, and Dylan Francis would be part of some of them, and another artist would be part of some of them, and fans like tapped into that. Even Miley Cyrus, like I always look at her show, right? Her show that like came up through and during quarantine, where like it went from her just like interviewing people because she too was just trying to figure things out, and she was doing that on her platform. And then it turned into like a full-fledged talk show. So like you said, like keeping that consistency, and even until now. And I think that's really like what winds up building those loyal fan bases. And when things reopen, and they will, that's who's going to be showing up at your show.
Right. And they'll be excited to go because it'll be one of the first shows they've probably been to in however long. So
exactly. And it's really interesting. Like, like I see it, of course, with Sofi Tukker because I work so closely with them and I'm a fan, I'm part of the Freak fam. I was on Twitch today, like, this is so empowering. Like, everybody's just so positive. And like, even when you join the Twitch, the first thing that this says is like, this is a safe space. There is no negativity here. We welcome all. So if you've got nothing good to say, don't say it. Like, that's before you can even comment on the Twitch. And I loved that. And I'm starting to see like artists like come up with those like different worlds too. Like, there are communities, and it's amazing then seeing like fans connect with each other. I mean, hey, the BTS army doing good out here. I was very skeptical, but after that, I'm a fan.
Yeah. Right. Doing good for the world.
Doing good. The BTS army. Who would have thought that's who was gonna save us?
The dark horse.
Yes, BTS army and llamas. That's what's gonna save us from COVID.
That's amazing. Well, Bina, I think it's been so incredible to have you on. I mean, I think all the work you're up to at Ultra is incredible. I think you've already accomplished a lot, but I think it's still the future is very bright. So we're very grateful to have you on, and we'll keep an eye out for the moves you continue to make. So thank you.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Awesome. Well, peace.
Bye, guys.
Man, I was really enjoyed that conversation. What did you think, Jordan?
Yeah, man. I mean, I was definitely, it's funny. We interviewed a good amount of marketers, but they all have different viewpoints on what their career is actually like, because marketing is such a human thing, depending on the artist you work with, depending on the genres you work with, it's different for everybody. And I felt like we got another refreshing outlook on what the field is like and what a successful marketing campaign is like.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Ultra, like, power to them. I mean, I love what you were saying as far as them being kind of like, they're an indie label, but definitely on like the bigger side of like being an indie label. But I think they've been able to staff up and build an incredible team that delivers incredible results. And I think a lot of that is under Bina's leadership from the marketing standpoint. So I think she'll continue to do great work. I think the artists on the roster, they continue to be proactive there. And I think even right now too, it's as artists can't tour and play live performances, like being able to really count on your label, drive revenue through streams is so critical right now. So I think everything we discussed is super, super valuable. Hope y'all enjoyed it too. And if you haven't already, please be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. Helps us make sure we continue to really hit on what you're getting the most value from, as well as help get the podcast in front of new people. And on that note, we love y'all. We'll be back next week. Thank you and good luck.